This is the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, show 61, from dream killer to co-conspirator, how this couple built their ideal life with Armando and Christian Cruz.
I think the idea of balance is a losing proposition. I think if you're shooting for balance, you're going to be disappointed. And I think that's where a lot of the issues come, is this idea that you're supposed to be balanced and you can't seem to get it. So it always feels like you're treading water and you're drowning because where's this balance that everyone talks about? Because I can't seem to get it. And I would instead reframe it and think about it as priorities.
Hi, Ariana here with a quick PSA about why this topic is so important to us. Tom and I know how challenging it can be to start and run a business, to take care of your loved ones, and on top of it all, to keep a healthy relationship with your spouse. It isn't easy, and that is why we created our Lifestyle Builders Mentorship Program. As a special offer during this very special Couples and Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. So if you, and your spouse is welcome too, need more strategy, support, and guidance in your business and life, plus people who truly care about you and will keep you accountable, sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the code LBcouples. Welcome to another episode of our special Couples and Entrepreneurship Month. Before we dive in, a little bit more about Christian and Armando. Christian, an exercise physiologist specializing in chronic pain in clinical populations, and Armando, a lifestyle physical therapist and legacy coach, together have 3 amazing kids. Over the 11 and a half years that Christian and Armando have been married, they created and built the Cruz Country Fitness and Physical Therapy as a holistic solution for people who want to overcome injuries and pain while working out and getting fit, without the risk of injury, so that they can live happier, healthier, pain-free lives. Christian and Armando have also created these virtual specialty programs, the Cleanse and Renewal Program, Vida Via, and From Suffering to Unstoppable. Armando is also the best-selling author of The Legacy Code, Modern Man's Guide to Escape Obscurity and Live a Life Unleashed. Both Christian and Armando also speak at various events and to various groups throughout the year. All right, this was another fun episode for our Couples and Entrepreneurship Month. We brought on Christian and Armando, who have been together for 11 and a half years. And one thing that we jumped into right at the beginning was their first attempt at running a gym or a personal fitness program actually failed. They started right after their wedding and were getting their family and friends into shape and were like, oh, we're going to make it a business. And they actually stopped everything and kind of started over, which, you know, a lot of people don't often talk about those stories. So I loved that we kind of chatted on that, where they went through like what went wrong, what do we do differently the next time, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, well, and then building off of that, we talked about roles. And as they were each talking about kind of the roles they played, it felt eerily similar to what we've kind of fallen into. So the whole title, which is awesome, by the way, of this episode came from within the episode where, you know, basically Armando was saying he played a certain role, Christian played a certain role, and they were complete opposites. And so, you know, we find that a lot with different entrepreneurial couples that we work with, that people fall into different roles, and sometimes it's a challenge to manage that. So I think there was some really good advice in here about that topic.
Yeah, they're also parents. So we talked about just kind of how that throws a wrench into maybe some systems that you already had set up in your business, and then all of a sudden kids come along. I loved the analogy from this episode of the seasons.
Oh, we had lots of
talking
analogies
about the different seasons of life, of business, how they often coincide and play off of each other. And yeah, there was a lot of great stuff in this episode.
All right, so with that, we'll let you guys dive in.
Enjoy. All right, you guys, welcome back to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, our special Couples and Entrepreneurship series. Christian and Armando, thank you guys so much for joining us on the show. Before we jump into the good stuff, why don't you guys give us just a quick, how did you kind of get into this entrepreneurship and this relationship together? Oh, and I forgot to ask.
Sure.
I forgot to ask a specific person too. Armando, why don't you start, and then we'll have Christian jump in.
Well, I think it's funny because we had this conversation when I was on that she was probably the more natural entrepreneur growing up. So, but the story of how our business essentially started was our wedding. So we're getting married and our family tells us, hey, we want to get in shape for the wedding. So we started training them, because we were training privately our clients, but it wasn't our business at the time. Like that wasn't our company at the time. That wasn't all that we were doing. And so when they started telling us, we're like, okay, well, we can't train each one of you individually. So on Saturdays, let's meet up in my mom's house. And we started getting more and more family. And we have a big family. And before you knew it, we really didn't start fitting in the backyard anymore. And we were doing it around the pool. And it was a lot of fun. And then we're like, man, we need more space. And around that time, we were thinking about kind of making this more serious. So we found the space. And so the family came over, and that's essentially how it started. But after the wedding, it died.
Oh, no.
Yes. So this is part of the journey, right? Everyone thinks, everything went great. It didn't. Why don't you let me relay, high five, your turn.
Yeah, so like you said, our family wanted us to get them in shape for our wedding. And so like he said, it was growing, and then people were like, well, you should turn this into a business because look how many people you have. But it's a very different thing when you're doing something for free than when you're now having to charge for it and, pay rent and buy equipment and, find a way to get the word out. And how do you go about charging? Do I do it per session? Do I do it per week? It's like, how do you go about signing people in and keeping track of all that? And so when we moved into the space that was not his parents' backyard, we now had a facility, but we had no business plan. Like we had no idea. It was just like they say, if you build it, they will come. Well, it was there, but no one was coming anymore. And so we just had to stop it because, it didn't make sense. We were, spending all this time and we're making maybe like $10 or $20 a week off of that. So it just made no sense. So we decided to just stop, end it. And we just took a break from it. And eventually we came across, or Armando came across what's called Fit Body Boot Camp. And he showed me all that, business plan essentially and what that all meant. And it made sense to me. It was like, okay, this makes sense. This is something that we can follow that can, actually be a business. And so we started doing that. And so we became Miami Fit Body Boot Camp. And we were growing and we had tons of people, and we were, hiring trainers, and we had our assistant and we had a lot of sessions. We kept opening up more sessions. So it was really booming. And then we got to a point where we realized we wanted to do things a little differently. And so we decided to stop being affiliated with Fit Body Boot Camp and, rebrand as Cruz Country Fitness and Physical Therapy and do things our own way with our unique kind of take on fitness and physical therapy. And so we basically combined the two and created this new group program. And it actually continued from what Fit Body was, but it kind of evolved in the way we delivered the service. And it's something that we're actually very proud of now, and we're very excited about. And now we've been, since we started Fit Body, we've been going on for about 9 years now, I believe, without having to stop. Without stopping. It's just been, and it's just every year we make it better and better, and it's just really exciting, and it's our baby,
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
I would say one.
Go ahead.
One thing that kind of like that shift for us was important because both her and myself, we've always been the type of people who have always focused on delivering high value and charging that. And what was happening was when we were doing the Fit Body, the plan was, or the model that they followed was very much turning into a commodity. It was what everyone was doing. It was just weight loss. It wasn't something that we were like extremely passionate about. And we're like, wait, we need to take a step back from this and say, it's not that it was bad. It was just, is it really what we want to create? Is this in alignment with our values? And when we took a step back and we said, something is not right here. And it's not that that's bad. It's just that that's not us. And for us, I think that was a big turning point, that after having seen, okay, well, what does business actually look like? Because we didn't go to business school. We didn't do any of that. Once we understood the principles, we're like, okay, now let's make it our own. And let's create something that we're actually proud of, that is unique and is really serving people in the way we believe people should be served. And I think that's kind of where we are today. Ever evolving, right? Ever evolving, but
of course,
definitely something we're extremely proud of.
Yeah. Well, so I think what's interesting is that, you guys did a lot of things that we always recommend to people. It's like, go with what people are asking for, right? And that's what you guys did when you started the business. And then there's always that kind of challenge of like, when do we do planning and how much planning do we do? So it's like, we don't want to plan too much up front because we don't know what we don't know. But at the same time, if we don't have any planning, then we might drift away. And it sounds like you guys did a pretty good balance, even though you had some ups and downs, of taking enough action to then figure out this wasn't exactly what you wanted to do in terms of how you wanted the business and the life to look. And then from there, you guys were able to get more clarity and kind of make that shift, which is huge. Now, the question that I have for you guys is, when Ariana and I started the business, basically myself, and she wasn't involved. So I kind of knew what my role was and I knew what her role was. When you guys started, it sounds like you did it together. So how did you guys like split up those roles? And, Christian, I'm interested in your perspective on this. How did you guys split up those roles initially? And, were there any challenges that came up because you guys were doing this together?
Yeah, so when we first started the business, this part of the business, I actually had a full-time job at a gym, and Armando at the time was training clients one-on-one in a different part of town. And when we decided to do the Fit Body Bootcamp thing, he decided that he was going to quit all his clients to just like dive into this thing to make sure it worked and he has the time. And so he basically came home one day and was like, I'm quitting all my clients. I'm like, what? Like that's like, you have our income right now, and then you're going to have this business expense before we even have this thing going, so it was a little scary at first. But I actually, just focused on working what I had, my position was commission based. So I just worked on making as much income as I could during that time. And he like really just worked it and we got it going. And I was actually very impressed that he made it happen. He did what needed to be done and he made it happen and we got the business going. And as we, were growing, we realized we needed to hire an assistant. And so basically we weren't making enough income through the business to hire the assistant yet. But I was working to kind of pay for the assistant too. And then, we're starting making more income because we had an assistant. And then it was like, okay, now we could hire a trainer and then we'd go from there. So it's kind of like this, you're making a little more money and then you got to put more money into it. You got to, make a little bit more money. And eventually I quit my full-time job and now this is all we do. So, so that's amazing because now we're both in it full time, so, and we're like a 2-person show and we have 3 kids. So we do everything, anything that needs to be done. We just do it. If he needs to teach a session or train a client, he does it. If I need to do it, I do it. It kind of like the roles go back and forth depending on what needs to be done to balance with like family life, right? However, he is more of like a people person. And so he really gets energy from speaking with people and engaging with people and like, for example, sales conversations. Whereas I prefer like my Excel spreadsheets and managing, like making sure all our ducks are in order and everything's taken care of on the back end. So he's definitely more of the face, like, of the company, and I'm kind of more behind the scenes. However, we both still see our clients, our one-on-one clients. But that's kind of how we divide, the different responsibilities of the business.
I'll say something, and speaking to the challenges, because I know that's kind of like the thing is, well, how do you, what were the challenges? Because that there are some, so nothing's perfect. I would say, and you heard it in her story, hopefully you heard it, how, from one second to the next, I get an idea and, all right, I'm quitting everything else. I'm going 100% this way, right? So I get you, right? Which for her, like, her not knowing the future freaks her out. Me not knowing the future excites me, right? That's adventure. So the biggest issues that we had were always with regarding that, is saying, I operate in this way, she operates in that way, and what I would think was a good idea very often didn't feel like a great idea to her. And then her ideas always felt like, you're like handcuffing me here. What do you like? I can't know all this stuff. If not, I'm never going to do anything. So the difficulty came in understanding that, and it took some time to understand that. And still, it's not perfect. There's still times that I do some crazy things, and she's like, "What are you doing?" But I think understanding now where our strengths lie has really helped us, right? Like she said, I would rather be behind the spreadsheets, making sure all the ducks are in a row. That would be like, shoot me if I had to do that, right? Like I would do it for a day or two, but to do that every day consistently, I couldn't do that. But on the same time, if you asked her to go every day to go and talk to people, it demands a lot of energy. Not because she doesn't like people, but it takes more energy than just being behind the computer or doing some of this managerial stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel the same way about the stuff that she does. So once we really got clear on her strengths and got clear on my strengths, we're like, okay, well then, I'm in charge of, the marketing and the operations. She's in charge of essentially the finances. She's a CFO and everything along with that. I am the CEO and COO kind of in one. And yeah, like we cross sometimes, but we try to have something a little bit more concrete so that we can be held accountable to that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's funny because you guys are so very similar to us. And that's exactly like you're saying, like, oh, I'd rather be behind a screen. I love people, but it's the same thing for me with like having that time to myself to just like replenish the energy sometimes. But like having to switch roles is very tough. And I think that's one of the ways that I've had to grow. So I would love to know, like, if you looked back at yourselves right after you got married and you started the new business, and now, 9 years later from starting the Cruz Country, what's one way that you feel that your partner has grown? So Christian, what's one way you think Armando has grown since back then? And then Armando, the same for Christian.
Wow. Okay. So I think a lot of it is that we've grown in understanding each other. And so like he was saying that he felt like, that I was kind of, I used to be like the dream killer, I guess.
Not an official title. It wasn't official, but.
So he's been more aware that like if he comes to me with a idea, my instinct when I hear an idea is like, okay, but what's the plan, right? Like I need to see the big picture, right? I need to see where this is going. And he just has the idea. Like the how is not part of his thinking. So I've learned to not ask that as much and instead to just be like, tell me more, you know. But he's also become more aware that I need time. Like I need to be prepared for something, meaning I don't like to be told, oh, in 30 minutes, we're doing, you know, this interview, for example, you know, like I want a week's notice so I can like plan my week and be prepared and, you know, all that stuff. So he's become definitely a lot more aware of giving me more time and also giving me the time to replenish, like what you were saying, because I need my time to myself to recover and replenish and prepare. And then if I get that, then I can show up and I can, you know, do what I need to do and then support him. So he's definitely helped with that and also in just understanding each other. And we've grown a lot together. Honestly, we constantly are going to events and seminars and continuing educations together. And we talk about it because even books, like he'll, you know, read a book and then I'll read the book, you know, so that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
You know, so we try to like keep things like stay on the same page because as different as we are, if we don't continually strive to, you know, get on the same page, we're just going to like, you know, diverge. So that's something that we're constantly doing and working towards.
Yeah, I love that. It was right. It was like you were talking in what I would be saying. And Armando, what about you? What's one way that you feel like Christian has grown?
I feel that she's really understood. I think like very similar to what she said. I think it's been that cooperation between us to grow together, to better understand each other. Like actually, okay, what are you going through right now? You know, when I say this, how does that make you feel? What's going through your mind? Because in my head, I'm thinking one thing and you're going in a completely different direction. So there's something that's being lost in translation here because I'm expecting you to be just as excited. But so I think the biggest thing that I've noticed with her is she seems to understand me more. So like you said, I feel so much more supported and I feel like she's communicated better to me so that I can be better supportive to her. I would probably say she's had in the past year and a half, like a big jump in growth from where she was mentally. And a lot of that had to do, I mean, like you said, we have 3 kids. I think there was a lot of recovery that had to happen after each child, which, you know, we don't have to carry them. And like, that takes a lot from you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, she breastfed for each one of them for almost a year, pretty much most of them, you know, 10 months to 14 months, right? I think somewhere in there, that was the range, 10 to 14 months each one.
Yeah.
And so that consumes you. And if you're having to deal with that, plus having to deal with everything else, like she was exhausted for a long time. And I feel like she's healed herself so that now she's thinking about that growth potential. And she's like, man, now it doesn't feel like she's the dream killer anymore. It feels like she's a co-conspirator in creating it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's exciting to me, but it's also like that. Like, those are one of the things that makes me most happy is seeing her laugh and seeing her smile. And she's doing that more now because I feel like she's there. Whereas before I felt like I had this dream and she was so like just trying to survive that she couldn't see that. So it was like, no, you know what? I still need a life preserver. Yeah. I don't need another boat. I need a life preserver. I need to make it to the boat first.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think we just got the title for this episode, From Dream Killer to Co-Conspirator.
There it is.
You know, I love that. And, you know, what I took away, and it's almost scary how similar you guys are to us. The biggest thing I took away there is that it requires growth. And what I hear a lot of times from people that are struggling is they don't realize, like, you know, people probably look at you guys from the outside and it looks like everything's together. But it's kind of like that iceberg picture you always see. It's like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But people don't see all the work and all the growth that's required, because we had very similar things. Like, I'd get an idea and I'd be like, there, like, let's go. And then she'd be like, well, what about this? What about that? And I would immediately see it as like, well, you're not on board. Like, what's going on? And that was a huge struggle for us. But once we figured out that, like, hey, this is how we think differently and these are the strengths, it actually works really well together. But we've got to constantly kind of keep each other in check to say, well, let's make sure that you're articulating that vision you have. And on the flip side, well, let's make sure that, you know, you're not letting fear hold things back, but, you know, we're in this together. So I got a question kind of related to that. You guys mentioned you got 3 kids, and, you know, we have 2, and we saw the same thing. Every time we had a new business come up, the business was at a certain point, and then our life and kind of what we had to do was at a certain point. So how do you guys, quote unquote, balance it all? I mean, we get this question from couples all the time. Like, how do you guys balance everything? And we have kind of our strategies, but I'm curious to hear, like, you know, Armando, like, how do you guys make it all happen?
You mind if I say something? I was going to say, I think the idea of balance is a losing proposition. I think if you're shooting for balance, you're going to be disappointed. And I think that's where a lot of the issues come, is this idea that you're supposed to be balanced and you can't seem to get it. So it always feels like you're treading water and you're drowning, because where's this balance that everyone talks about? Because I can't seem to get it. And I would instead reframe it and think about it as priorities. What is my priority right now? And there's different seasons in your life, different phases in your life that bring about more importance. An analogy is this concept of, like, the jazz band, the jazz quartet. You know, they're all playing the same song, but in the song, there's an opportunity for each instrument to solo. They don't stop playing the song. The song is still playing. So that means everyone is still doing their job. But right now the trumpet is blowing and doing his solo. You know, then the drummer is going to go and they're going to do the solo. And then the piano is going to go and then they're going to do the solo. The same thing happens when you're married, when you have kids, with your health, with your business. There's going to be some time that's going to demand more upfront investment. And instead of looking at it as balance, thinking about it as a time to solo. Think about it as a time of, oh, this is my intention. This is my focus right now, right? So it's not that you stop everything, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to stop my health right now. I'm not going to work out. I'm going to eat like crap because I got to focus on the business. No, you do the minimal that you can do right now while maintaining the thing that's taking the top of the list right now. Maybe you're starting a business, so you got to invest a little bit more make it more top heavy at the beginning, because you need to get that momentum going. With your marriage, the same thing has to happen. You know, you got to invest up front. And yes, you got to keep things going. But if you don't take a step back and say, okay, wait, how are we spending time together? How are we growing together as a couple? Are we going to retreats together? Are we reading books that we can discuss? You know, are we creating the space to have time together? If you're not aware of creating those opportunities to solo, then they get drained and it just becomes a one instrument band, which isn't a band anymore, right? So I hope that analogy is helpful, but it's the way I conceptualize it in a way that kind of works from my head.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I mean, honestly, just thinking about life in that way, and then obviously having the business as well, that's one of the biggest struggles that I think we had and a lot of other people have, is when you're trying to run a business, those life priorities tend to pop up just when you've got big things going on in your business. And, you know, everyone kind of has that freak out moment, like, oh, how can I do all the things? And it's, you have to be honest with yourself sometimes. And like you said, which priority is the most important? You do whatever's needed to maintain the other stuff. And maybe you didn't get to do what you were planning to do, but you've got to take that step back and really look at what the priorities are. And I mean, I had that I went through that with all of the kids and the businesses, because of course this guy decided to start the last 2 businesses that we started when I was pregnant with the children.
I was gonna say there was a correlation there. We'd have a child, we'd start a business.
Yeah. So it was just, I was not in the right state of mind, and he's over here trying to start businesses, and I'm being the dream killer and the, exhausted mom trying to survive. And it was one of those things where we each kind of had our priorities in different places. So we had to take a step back and say, okay, this isn't working. We've got to stick with one priority, and then we can go back and work on that other one. So I love that analogy, because it is really like a band. The music's playing underneath, it's going to keep going, but you're going to always have that louder piece that's going on in the front.
Well, I was going to say, and just quick with that too, I love that analogy too, because what tends to happen, what we see a lot of people do, is that priority thing kind of takes everything over and they stop the other stuff. So like, we see people stop their health. So they stop working out or they stop eating healthy. And then that kind of, deteriorates everything else and doesn't allow you to show up and have the performance for the priority thing. So I love when you describe that as, listen, they're all still playing, but you're kind of doing the minimum required to keep it going. And every time you have something new start up, it's going to take more, but making sure that the rest of the band's playing while you go, like that's such good advice. Don't leave them behind.
Yeah. Yeah, a very real life example of how we would, I guess, to answer your question, balance things out, right, is after I had my 3rd baby, so we had managed to save enough for me to take 3 weeks off of work. So after 3 weeks, I had to go back to work. So, most women in let's say a corporate job maybe can take off 3 months. Well, now I only could take off 3 weeks. And I was breastfeeding. So we had to tag team. That's what it was. And basically we had a nanny that was taking care of the other 2 kids, or they were in school or something. And then the baby, I would actually take him to work with me. And then, I was actually working in another gym, paying rent and stuff. And I would bring him in a stroller and I'd set him there and see my clients. And then in between, I'd take him, and feed him and then change his diaper and then put him back in the stroller. And so this is the first few weeks. And then he was getting a little bit bigger. So then Armando would actually have him, and I would see a couple clients, and then we'd meet in a parking lot, and then I'd breastfeed him, and then I'd hand him off, and I'd go back to work, and he would take him to the nearest coffee shop, and he would be working on the computer or something there, doing, whatever he needed to do. And, then we'd meet up again. So I'd meet him at the coffee shop, and then I'd breastfeed him, and we'd then I'd hand him back off, and I'd go back to my clients, and he'd continue. And and then maybe, so that was the day I had clients, and then maybe I didn't have clients one day and he was with clients that day and I was doing the computer stuff. So
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so we were just constantly tag teaming the baby, here, hand off, you're playing football, and little toss back, and until he was 3 months old. And then at that point, it was easier to leave him with the nanny, and, I could, pump or whatever, but I could leave him with the nanny at that point. But we were very much just tag teaming. It was literally, surviving. It was, and when things happen, it's amazing how creative you get. You figure out solutions that you would never think of, because just never had that situation. So things come up all the time with kids, and we just figure it out, and we just figure out a solution. And then the other thing that has really helped, I think, with balancing things and making sure our priorities, that music keeps playing in the background, is coming up with systems for things.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by a system is like, it could be a person, right? Like having a nanny.
Yeah,
or
that's
having
a great system.
an assistant, or having a trainer. Because it could be a person that is like that's taking care of, this person's taking care of that. Or it's just, having a system in place for doing things so that we don't have to like reinvent the wheel every time we're going to do it. And it just automates things and makes things flow easier. So it takes up less time, and then you can actually focus on the things that are, really important in that moment.
I love that real life story though, because I think even like Armando was like, oh, I forgot about that. People don't realize like this stuff is real, and you just make it up as you go along, and you do what you have to do to make things work. And I think that's part of why like this journey with entrepreneurship and marriage and parenting is just, it's so rewarding. And it's also one of the most challenging things, because every time you think you got something figured out, something pops up in the middle of there to be like, well, just kidding. Now you've got to find a new system or get like really creative to say, oh, now we've got to do it this way. And we've got to make things work differently than they were before, which I love.
Yeah, well, and even Armando, you were talking about like the seasons. And once again, I think that's such a good way to frame it, because, let's just say we'll take like the, spring, summer, winter, and fall. You might be into spring and things are kind of crazy, and you figure out how to manage spring. The rain's coming, but you got an umbrella, you're good. And now suddenly things kind of shift, and now you're in summer. And the umbrella that worked really well in spring is now not working nearly as well, in summer. So now you got to maybe switch to like, suntan lotion or whatever. And like we found the same thing, because our businesses have seasons, from startup to then growing and all of that. And then our kids have seasons too. Mm-hmm. And as we've kind of gone through, it's interesting to see how those overlap. And, basically like the business might really be doing well, and now we got to potty train our kid.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well now that's taking a whole different spin on like what we've got to manage. And then we get through that, and then maybe the business has some challenges. So that way of kind of looking at it, I think is really cool, because we all do have a lot of stuff going on, but looking at it from seasons is basically, I know we're good now, but I'm kind of expecting the next season to come. So I know that I'm going to have to make some changes. So I'm not as surprised when it happens.
Yeah. And I think not being so overwhelmed when it is happening, because everyone's like, oh, it's so hard right now. When is this going to end? Yeah. It's going to end. All the seasons come to an end, and something new will start. It's just like, it's setting your mind to remember that, like potty training, it will come to an end. We maybe don't know exactly when, but we know that someday it's just going to click, and then, it's going to be good.
That seems fresh on your mind. Is that
fresh in our mind, because we just got rid of pull-ups in this house. Woo!
Oh, that's right. I remember when you posted it. She posted. We just got rid of pull-ups in our house, and I'm like, what do you have against pull-ups? They're great exercises.
He went with the exercise version. I meant, the kid version.
Yeah. Just to show that we're not in that season right now.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we're not thinking that.
We are moving on out of that season. All right. So before we get to the lightning round, is there anything else you guys want to share with the listeners in particular about your journey so far?
I think that what you said was, and what we've been talking about, the season is really important. And there's been a lot of times in the marriage and the parenting journey and in the business journey where I didn't think it was a season. I thought like, oh no, this is the rest of my life, right? Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't thinking of it in that context. I just thought like, this is just like doomed forever, right? Like whatever it is. And that's how I felt with my first child. I was like, oh my God, my life is over. Like I was barely surviving that first year. And then after that first year, I was like, oh, like we made it out alive. And there's like a future, And after that, it was easier to kind of realize that things do come in seasons and it will end, like you said. And it's like that in parenting. It's like that in marriage. It's like that in business. And I think that one of the things that we, because when you're in the struggle, is that you forget sometimes to appreciate the good, right? Mm-hmm. Like you might hear older people say, oh, these are the best times when the kids are little, and you're like, I'm barely surviving.
You're like, what are you talking about?
So yeah, when you're in it, it's hard but there really is something beautiful about each season, even if it feels very difficult. And there's always something good that can come out of it. And if we look for those like hidden gems, then that makes everything worthwhile, and it makes everything, you know, so much more enjoyable. And then it's like, oh, okay, like this is a new challenge. You know, how are we going to, you know, what are we going to learn from this? How are we going to grow from this? You know, this is happening for a good reason, you know, like this is because it's happening for a good reason, you know, like, so we kind of now we really focus on trying to reframe anything that, you know, you may consider not a good thing in that way, so that we can find the positive, we can find the life lesson, and move forward faster rather than just, you know, sitting in that feeling of doom and gloom.
Right. I would add context, right? So if you're in winter and you're expecting to be sunbathing at the beach, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you're winter, not here in Miami, but anywhere else north, you know, you can enjoy the snow. You can enjoy the outdoors in a very, very unique way that you couldn't in summer. And the same thing, if you're in summer expecting it to be cool, you know, 40s and 50s or cold, and, you know, you're going to be disappointed. So like Christian was saying, take the gem, the beauty of each season, and really step into it. Embrace it. Don't fight it. Embrace each season and learn something from it. Bring out the best in that season so that it can really serve you and your family and your mental state so much more, as opposed to, again, just fighting it and saying, oh, you know, I want to be in a bikini and bathing suit all the time. And, you know, yeah, I try to make that happen. We live in Miami. That pretty much happen most of the times, but there's sometimes I got to put on my costume.
I love that. You're going to get some hate mail from some people that have snow, by the way.
I was going to say, and I'm sure we could keep going on with this, but I just want to add one thing, because I mean, this analogy that we're talking about, I think it's so important. Even when you're in that season, it doesn't mean that you can't take a trip away, right? If we've got this long New York winter going on, we can take a trip away and go enjoy a little bit of the beach down in, you know, Florida, and then we come back to it. And I think that's so important, that when we're in maybe some of those seasons where things are more challenging, realizing that we can step away for a little bit, recharge ourselves, and then come back. Like that is so important.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to hit you guys with some lightning round questions. Oh, just kidding. After Armando.
Okay. Oh, I was just going to say, just to piggyback off that, because I think that the analogy kind of extends. So when you say, hey, take a trip, yeah, when we're talking about vacation and the physical component, what does that mean? Oh, I get up on a plane and fly out to somewhere nice and warm because I'm freezing my butt off over here. Okay, great. So I get that. So what happens when we're talking about business? What happens when you're feeling like you're struggling? How do you take that mental vacation? How do you take that? That's where having a group, having a coach that you can borrow their mind, their not being in threat, to help give you that perspective. That's where surrounding yourself with the right people that can give you the context and perhaps the support that you need to get you through that, or to make it seem like summer when it feels, when it's really winter. You know what I'm saying? Like surrounding yourself with those people, with those perspectives that you personally wouldn't have. You borrow them from other people that you trust and can actually serve you. So I just wanted to add that in, because
I love that. That's a great addition too, because it is, you have to figure out how to do that from a mental space, not just a physically get up and get out of the house or get out of the season that you're in space. And I think that mental piece is really important for entrepreneurs and people that are parents and in relationships, all three. All right. So I've just got a couple for fun lightning round questions that I figured we could ask before we close out the show. First, which one of you is more likely to forget important dates like anniversaries and birthdays?
This guy right here.
I love that you both answered the same answer.
I was going to say, I forgot my
This was like the Newlywed Show. Yeah. I've never forgotten my birthday.
Yeah.
I've never forgotten my birthday, but I pretty much forget mostly everyone else's.
He actually asked me if we could get married on his birthday, so he'd never forget our anniversary.
That's genius.
I told you, I said, I've never forgotten my birthday.
And I said, no, you got to remember anniversary.
And then who asked who on your very first date?
I would say he did.
Yeah, I asked her out on the first date. Yes.
All right. I love it. I'm glad
And
you guys both
rejected me.
answered.
She rejected me. Yes. Remember in the track? That time I asked her to go
I
out.
wasn't even thinking about that time.
Yes. That was even before we started dating.
Yeah, I
I asked her out and she was like, oh, I got other plans. I was like, fine.
Right?
Oh my gosh. I love it. You guys are so much fun. So we kind of already covered this in the seasons talk, but is there anything else you really want people to take away from your story?
Put in the work. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the hustle and the grind that everybody talks about in their business. Put in the work on you and your marriage, because at the end of the day, the businesses can come and go. But if you don't work on your marriage, then what's it for? Right?
Yep.
So you have a little extra money. Well, if you get divorced, you're going to have half of that at least. So is it really worth it? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Again, it goes back down to the priorities. Why are you doing what you're doing? If it's to be with your family, be with your family. If it's to grow together, grow together. You don't need money. You don't need anything other than each other to do that. So start with that as the nucleus. And I share that not because I do it perfectly, because as a reminder, this is something I constantly have to remind myself. I have to step back and say, why am I doing this? Is the amount of time, effort, energy, focus that I'm putting to this project worth it, or should I be doing something else?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is yes, great, we do it. If the answer is no, then okay, well, what should I be doing? What's the most important thing? And for us, working on the marriage is one of the most important things. We're not perfect. We don't live a perfect life. And when I say that, like, it's not that we don't argue. It's not that, it's that we're willing to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
We ask questions. We're, trying to do, we have to do it again. We haven't been doing it. The marriage app, what's it called?
What is it called?
I don't know. There's a marriage app that the reason I bring it up is it's just one of the things that we try to do to, open up conversations that are easily get lost when you're in the day-to-day. What is it called?
It's called Lasting.
Lasting.
Yeah.
Lasting.
Okay.
And so the app connects with your partner, so you both download it. There's some quizzes that you would take and then some kind of material for you to kind of study.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see what the other person answered for their quiz. And you can also now have conversations, especially if they were different. It shows you what's different between you. Like, oh, you answered this, she answered this. And now it opens up communication that it's easy to get lost on the day-to-day when you got 3 kids and you got a business or more than one business. And you're hustling and bustling going from one place to the other. It helps you stop and reflect a bit more.
I love that. We're going to have to download that app.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's we actually started it as a proactive way of helping our marriage, not because we were in the middle of an issue or problem. And basically, the way we run our business, how we coach our clients is you don't need to start, working out until you're, sick and you're having a heart attack, for example. You're proactive about your health before you get sick or before you have an issue. You're already doing things to help your health and your fitness. And, before your kids are failing, you're helping them, with their homework, or you're helping them with, with a tutor or something, before your car has like a complete breakdown, you fill it with gas and you change the oil. So we do this in other areas of our life, but we don't always do this in our marriage. And so we decided, like, we need to be proactive about investing time on working in the marriage, not just like on going on dates and which is important too, right? To have fun and do things, but to continually be learning about each other, to understand each other on different topics, on different things. We have, unfortunately, a lot of people that we know that have had marital problems or gotten divorced, and they waited until it was like one of them was about to leave or leaving to then see about getting help from like a counselor or a therapist, at which point, a lot of times one of them didn't want to go. And so it's kind of like so far gone that it's just so much more work to get back. And, doing this proactively, it's like, oh, okay, there's this thing that we disagree, but now we can talk about it and understand each other better. And maybe you disagree, but it's like a little thing, right? It hasn't become this thing. And so you can move forward, and you just keep moving forward more powerfully by doing that. So, and actually it's something we've worked on in the past year more so, now that the kids are a little bit older and we can think a little bit more clearly. Because at the root of our business is actually our marriage. And if our marriage isn't working, our business isn't going to work, at least not for very long. And our kids are not going to be in a good place. Our family's not going to work. So, it wasn't, what makes our business successful at the heart of it is not that we have like the best lead generation system and automation sequence, or that we have, like we work, hundreds of hours a week or something. At the root of it is that we work on the marriage, we work on the family, and then that's the root, and then everything else kind of falls into place somehow.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's very important for people to remember to take the steps to improve things and keep them in a good place before they start to go downwards.
Well, and I love that summary, because like you said, if an athlete wants to succeed, what do? They go and get a coach. Like, it's a natural thing. But a lot of us, when it comes to marriage, it's like this taboo subject where it's like we wait till the very end. And, just reframing that and realizing like this is the most important thing. Like, let's make sure we're investing the time, effort, energy, and money to make sure that it stays that way, because otherwise none of the other stuff matters.
All right. So if people want to connect with you guys, where is the best place for them to find you?
Well, we got a lot of real estate out there. I would probably say, our website. Yeah, our website, the cruisecountry.com, would probably be one of the easiest ways they can see us. Also, I'm going to plug it in here, my book.
And we'll put it on the page.
Legacy Code book. That's something that's near and dear, that you talk about working on yourself and kind of part of the whole wedding or marriage process. 4 years ago, I had this, it wasn't a midlife crisis, but it was one of these things where I felt that there was a huge shift in my life, and it almost it wreaked a lot of havoc on our business, on our marriage, because I just wasn't there. Like, I was in a really dark place. And, 4 years later, one of the things that I set out to do was to help married men who are entrepreneurs show up more powerfully in their marriage, in their business, in their health. And this book, The Legacy Code, is really about how men can start actively and purposely creating this legacy in their life with the most important things as the center, and create a legacy that inspires them. So that's legacycodebook.com.
Yeah, and we will put both of those in the show notes, which is going to be at tomandariana.com/61. All right, you guys, it's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders. And we just want to extend a huge thank you to you, Christian and Armando, for coming on and sharing your story with us and laughing with us and all of the things.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
Absolutely. And, for all the listeners, just remember, it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them. And just a reminder, as a special offer during this super special Couples in Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. Sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the promo code LBcouples. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.